Many thanks to Bethesda for providing me with a review copy of the game. I don't get it. Hello, my non-linear friends. I've been waiting for this for a heck of a while, but it is finally time to talk about Starfield. I mean, it's the next Bethesda RPG. And it's a new IP! And it's set in space, which is something I've been dreaming of for ages. So let's get to it. This right here is my review of Starfield. First, a little background on me. I have played and greatly enjoyed 3 Bethesda RPGs. Oblivion, Skyrim, and Fallout 3. I know everyone says New Vegas is super good, but I haven't gotten around to it, and I haven't played Fallout 4 either. So for me, it was Oblivion, then it was Fallout 3, then it was Skyrim. And each of those games, naturally, I played for hundreds and hundreds of hours. I absolutely fell head over heels in love with them. Here's the thing, you young folks, you youngins, true non-linear sandbox open world games, they were not nearly as much of a thing back then. The novelty of being able to just pick a direction and run and find interesting stuff to do, like it was intense. These were stunning, unforgettable experiences. And I gotta tell you, here in 2023, I have been feeling way past due for another Bethesda game. I mean, it's been like a decade since I played Skyrim for the first time. Like, I was ready for a new Bethesda fix. I was ready to get lost in another world. But Starfield? Elder Scrolls, but in space? Yes! I don't even like post-apocalypse stuff that much, but I loved Fallout, so you're telling me there's gonna be a sci-fi Bethesda RPG? I love sci-fi, I love space, exploring space in that formula, it sounded like a dream come true. However, there have been a couple of problems. One, Bethesda as a company has really hit some rough patches in recent years, and they've done some pretty gross stuff. Fallout 76 naturally comes to mind. Todd Howard has completed his metamorphosis from cool, down-to-earth guy who's just a gamer like us to gross, detached, shareholder-pleasing executive guy. It had been so long since I had played one of their RPGs that I honestly did not know if Bethesda had that magic touch anymore, that capability to create the kind of game that I wanted to play. And then the other problem was they took so long to reveal Starfield, and then when they did, it just did not look that interesting or impressive to me. There was never a trailer or a clip or anything that made me go like, oh wow, I can't wait to play this. It was all just kind of, but like I had to give it a try. I tried to go into it with an open mind, and like I knew it was all gonna come down to the execution. So now I have finally played the game, quite a lot in fact, and I really super a lot want to like it more than I do. It's not a bad game. It is not a bad game by any stretch. And I can see that there are lots of people who are really loving it. Maybe it's perfect for them. It's great. That's totally awesome. No one is wrong for liking it, but I am personally pretty disappointed. But let's talk about why. Gameplay-wise, this is a Bethesda RPG. It is Elder Scrolls in space. I don't know why Todd Howard insisted that it wasn't at first, because it is. And that, for the record, is exactly what we wanted. That's good. It's at least what I wanted. It's a good thing. So on that front, at least, the game succeeds. You know, it doesn't change things up so much. It doesn't introduce wacky new elements to a degree that it stops feeling like a Bethesda RPG. You know, you got your big giant world, your sandboxy gameplay. You got lots of NPCs, lots of dialogue, lots of quests. You're fighting lots of enemies. You're following map markers. You're looking for loot. The gameplay is all about shooting with guns, so naturally it's a bit more on the Fallout side of things as far as gameplay goes. On that front, I will say the gunplay feels a lot better than it does in Fallout, but at the same time, at least Fallout had like the VATS system, so that was kind of like it took the gunplay and added a fun little thing to it, and this game doesn't really have that. It doesn't really have that like extra element to make it more interesting or more RPG-ish or more fun. So it's definitely got that going against it. It really is just kind of shooting guns, which is, it's fine, I guess. Really, I'd say the primary difference between this game and other Bethesda games is, you know, the space part, the sci-fi part. Instead of one big map, you travel between planets and space stations and such. You got a ship, and you can go up into space and kind of jump around from there. And this was the part I was the most excited about. Space exploration. Again, I just love space, and you marry just like the humongous vastness of space to the cool RPG fun story elements of a Bethesda game. It's a match made in heaven. But man, that space exploration ended up being such a mixed bag. On the plus side, flying the ship it's kind of fun. It's decently fun. It's got this thing where you can redirect power to your ship's different systems, you know, your lasers and your ballista, or your grav drive to make a quick escape, or just your engines in general to go faster. And that's just a really cool idea, you know, makes you feel like you're actually piloting a ship out of Star Trek. The ability to divert power to the shields or whatever, like that's just fun. It's a cute idea. In practice, however, it really doesn't accomplish as much as I want, because it's kind of hard to do on the fly. Like, I'm fumbling with the D-pad trying to do this while I'm being shot at. Like, if you're in a situation where you're fighting and you really don't have time to mess with stuff like that, you're not gonna, at least I'm not. It just leads to a lot more fumbling than I would like. So it's like I can kind of appreciate the idea, but it's also kind of just fighting other ships, that does feel good. It's fun, it's the gameplay, there's good feedback, it's very crunchy. Locking onto other ships and dogfighting and smacking them with a missile at just the right time, like that does feel pretty good. Though that can also be kind of frustrating, because it's like, you know, it's not like a regular firefight down on the ground where you can take cover. It's just kind of like, nah, if your stats aren't good enough, they're just shooting you from all angles, and there isn't really much that you can do. So it feels like most battles, I end up exploding in seconds or completely dominating all of them and killing them all with like barely a scratch. I don't know, doesn't really seem to be a good balance there. I think it's very cool that you can disable ships and then board them, you know, like Assassin's Creed Black Flag style. Always thought that was really neat. Or you can destroy ships and pick up their stuff, get some free stuff. I really do like how it feels to just kind of fly around. Whenever you have like space stations or other ships to fly around, it just kind of, you know, it's a very feely kind of thing where like you hail the space station and they're like, oh, yep, you're clear to board. And then once you get close enough, that's when you can board. I don't know. It feels nice. Makes you feel like a ship guy. You know, if that makes sense. But I'm pretty disappointed by how little there actually is to do in the ship. How little you actually need to spend time flying around in it. For the most part, you're just fast traveling everywhere, so there's really just not a lot to do. Like when you're sitting in the cockpit, there's not much. And I think fast traveling, that is part of the issue. I thought space exploration, it should be very freeing. It should feel very open and amazing. Oh, I can't wait to explore. But instead, the end result is, I mean, it's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite of that fun feeling of exploration. It feels like exploration, quote unquote, as a concept is barely a thing. In other Bethesda games, you have to physically get to a place before you can fast travel to it. That's normal, it's how it goes. But here, you're traveling these vast distances across space, so there's no way to actually fly to a place just on your own. You can't do that. You have to jump around. So they just made it so that you can only jump to a system that's close to other systems that you have already jumped to. And what that amounts to is you're like, oh, I want to go over here for the first time. Oh, okay, so I'll jump here, and then there, and then there. Great. That did not accomplish anything. And I also just do not feel like I actually traveled to this area. I kind of just warped here, even though I've never been here before. And I get why they did this. I can see that this was kind of a solution if you're not able to freely fly around. I kind of get it, but like, it's just a very awkward way to handle it. The game being split up into so many tiny pieces, just so many pieces that you have to fast travel between them, and that's the only way to get between them. There's no sense of place. There's no sense that this is a consistent world. I barely even feel like I'm a guy on a spaceship exploring the galaxy. It doesn't feel like that at all. It feels more like I'm picking levels on a Mario world map, you know? It's just a revolving door of areas that just appear before me whenever I want them to. I mean, my gosh, Forget the ship. I can be standing on one planet and go into the map and instantly fast travel to a different planet without even glancing at my ship. And I get why. It would be way too tedious to have to always go back to your ship and always fly around manually. Like, I definitely get it. We needed the ability to move around quickly, or else the whole thing would get way too stale. And I understand that this is a space game. Star systems are many, many light years apart, you know? It's naturally gonna be fragmented. It's all different stars and different planets. Todd Howard mentioned in an interview that they considered giving us the ability to seamlessly fly from space down to the planet's surface and back up again, you know, kind of No Man's Sky style. They thought about it, but then they realized that it would be way too much work, way too much effort, considering how, like, it's really not that important of a thing at the end of the day. It's not actually that important to the player. And I get where he's coming from. Absolutely. That probably is a very complicated thing to mechanically accomplish. But honestly, I think that him and the team, they didn't consider what feel can do for a game. How much it improves the experience to actually feel like you are actually piloting a spaceship and exploring the galaxy. They really lost touch with that. Even if they weren't going to allow the whole space to surface seamless travel, I think at the very least, they could have given us an option to actually pilot the ship when we are traveling between systems. Instead of a loading screen, how about we get a little sequence where we're actually in the cockpit, we're in the slipstream, and we're kind of aiming our ship here and there and kind of traveling around the map in very large swaths. Make it take a few moments to get between systems, at the very least. Yeah, it would take longer, but it would feel so much better. I want to feel like I'm piloting, not just selecting from a map. I'm gonna bring up Starlink, Battle for Atlas, which is funny because most people will not tell you that that's a good game. I thought it was a cool game, and I felt like it handled this stuff way better. It had that seamless space to planet stuff, and then it functioned largely the way that I just described. There is fast travel, but you can also just kind of aim your ship at a planet and start warping very quickly toward it. And whereas in Starfield, sometimes you'll jump somewhere and then there will just be pirates there waiting for you already, Starlink had this cool system where you're in the slipstream and sometimes you get knocked out of the slipstream because, oh no, pirate ambush, now you gotta fight them. Or there'll be sequences where you have to maneuver around asteroids and stuff. It made the actual journey between these places that are very far apart, it made that part of the fun. And as a result, it felt way more like real space exploration. It was actually fun to get around space. But Starfield has none of that. It is all cold and technical and robotic and automatic. The space setting ends up doing very little other than introducing more loading screens. That's what this space sci-fi setting gave us. More loading screens. Now, it seems that a lot of the limitations you find in Starfield are there because of the scope of the galaxy. It seems that they made a lot of sacrifices in order to deliver us a just massive, humongous world, over 1,000 planets or whatever. They took a gamble. They were like, okay, let's just make things a little bit less interesting so that we can put more. And that gamble can work, going for a little bit more quantity over quality. You can kind of game that system. You can make things a little bit more by the numbers in order to push how many can be delivered to the player. That can work. But if you tip the scale a little bit too far, now you have a whole bunch of stuff that is just not interesting enough to want to engage with. More history. I loved planet exploration in Mass Effect 1. Again, I am in the minority. But here's the thing. I can do boring. I can do tedious. I can do procedurally generated fluff content if I am locked into a game's formula, its overall core experience. If it has me, if it's hooked me hard enough, then I'll do just about anything. I mean, that's Skyrim. I don't care that I'm going through these probably procedurally generated dungeons doing the same thing over and over. I really don't care because the whole thing is just fun. It's a fun world to be in. And that was Mass Effect planets. They were boring. The content was repetitive. You're basically just going around and collecting stuff, and it was really just nonsense. And yet I Loved it. I was hoping that Starfield would be that. It would be that enjoyable, repetitive fluff. And it's so funny, because when Todd Howard is like, yep, that's right, over 1,000 planets, that was supposed to be a selling point. He thought it was a selling point, but that's so many planets, everyone was just like, whoa, that's not as appetizing as you make it out to be. And early reports of the game were coming in, and they were like, yeah, the planets are just as boring as you expected. And even then, though, I was holding out hope that this would be a Mass Effect 1 situation, where it's like, it doesn't matter, as long as I'm engaged with the game, I will be happy that there are so many boring planets to explore. But nah. Nah. No, it really turned out to be the worst of what I expected might happen. These planets are just as boring as we feared. They are these samey, flat, dry, desolate landscapes with almost nothing in the way of interesting topography or landmarks. They're peppered with these procedurally generated dungeons, you know, like, oh, there's a base here, an abandoned mine, an abandoned ship, all these different things, and if you have seen one, you have seen them all. There are creatures on a lot of these planets, but even those are like procedurally generated. You can scan them, you can scan the creatures and the native plant life. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's great, that's really cool, you can get resources and stuff from it, but like, it's not fun, and there's so much that it doesn't even seem worth doing. But all the stuff on these planets, there is nothing that is interesting all by itself. And you know, I haven't played the entire game. I don't know everything that you'll find on a planet, but for the most part, you're not finding anything interesting. You're not finding characters. You're not finding quests or anything cool to do. All that stuff comes from other places. It comes from cities and space stations, and it leads you to the planets to do these kind of quests. But as far as just exploring a planet goes, really, there is nothing fun to do. And it could be fun. That's what's so frustrating, because there is, on paper, so much to do. All of these dungeons to explore, resources and creatures and plants to scan. Oh my gosh, any place, any planet, you can just build a base. You can pick your favorite planet and build all of these different machines to build an entire base for yourself, and it'll collect resources. You basically build your own little town. Oh my gosh, that's awesome, that's amazing. But no, because it's just too much, and none of it individually is interesting enough. Here's the thing. Give me a few dozen planets to explore, even if it's kind of tedious, I will probably do it if I'm enjoying the game. I'll feel good. I'll feel like I completed something, you know? But give me over 1,000 planets and I'm just like, okay, well, clearly none of these planets is actually worth exploring. It doesn't feel worth fully scanning any one place, discovering all these creatures, all these plants, or anything, because why would I? There's 999 other planets I could do that with. It's just no, I'd rather just do none of it. And that's what's so frustrating here. Seeing these planets, exploring them, it wasn't necessary. It doesn't do anything for the game. Giving us the over 1,000 planets or whatever, it's not a selling point. They could have gotten away with giving us so much less, a fraction of what they gave us. And they could have taken the effort to make each of those planets a little bit more interesting animals and plants to discover, more interesting topography and landmarks and stuff, more interesting dungeons to explore and quests to stumble upon. It could have been so much more purposefully crafted and interesting. But no, as it is, it's just a giant galaxy full of blech. As it is, exploring planets is not really worth doing unless you have a quest that has brought you to a planet. Otherwise, it's no fun to just land and start going, start looking for stuff. No, it's really not worth doing. And I will remind you again, I can do tedium. I can enjoy fluff. I love collecting resources. On paper, this game is a dream come true. All these things to collect and scan. It's a Bethesda RPG, but there's infinite stuff to explore and collect, and you can even build stuff and build bases, and you can research all this different stuff and upgrade and craft and everything. As far as stuff to do and crafting goes, this is so much deeper than any other Bethesda game that I have played. And yet it's just not interesting. And I will now talk about the other reason that this doesn't really work. You know, having just too much, having it too dilute, that is a big problem. But for me, there's a very, very humongous problem. with this game. It's that the world itself, the universe that they have created, is just not interesting. Let's go back to Elder Scrolls and Fallout. These worlds, they're full of tedium. They're full of fluff, but the worlds are also consistently fun to be in. They're consistently creative and interesting, and that hooks you into the formula, you know? Like, it's fascinating exploring the world of Skyrim and reading books and just kind of learning how this world works. It's a very weird, fantastical fantasy world. And then Fallout is very bleak and desolate, but like, it's still interesting. It's got these frozen in time 1950s elements. And yet for some reason, when we got to the 50s, we were like, technology was way further ahead than it actually was in the 50s. So it's kind of futuristic sci-fi, and everybody's trying to live in this world, and it's full of mutants, and everyone's trying to rebuild. It's just interesting. Starfield has none of that. Visually, it's super duper bland. And I guess this is why the game never really looked that appealing to me in the initial trailers and stuff. They call it NASA punk because it takes a very realistic take on sci-fi. Like, you could actually, like, yeah, you know, hundreds of years from now, if we go into space and we've all got our own ships, I could see it looking like this. It's got a very gritty, kind of realistic feel, and I can definitely appreciate that in its own way, but it's just not fun. It's not interesting to look at. Visually, it's just so boring. There's very little in the way of any kinds of visuals or locations or anything in this game that is captivating. A couple of the cities look all right, but like, that's it. It's mostly just endless space station, ship, abandoned mine, military base hallways. It's just corridors. You spend most of your time in boring corridors. Worse though, much, much worse. Conceptually, it's just bland. It's bland. That's the only word I can think to use. It is one of the most by-the-books, unimaginative takes on a spacefaring future humanity possible. There's no like weird or fun, interesting technology that these people have access to that makes you go, oh wow, the future's really cool. I have not found very much in the way of fun world building. It's your standard like, oh, at a certain point, Earth was uninhabitable, so we went into space. And now you've got the United Federation military corporate machine, and you've got the rebellious pirates, and like, that's it. That's the world. Like that. That's it. It's same old, same old. There aren't even aliens. That to me is unforgivable. Weird aliens and like exploring their cultures and their personalities and even just looking at them. They look different. That is so much of the fun of sci-fi. That's why sci-fi is a thing. And I don't doubt that there are aliens somewhere in the game, but like, you know, built into the canon of this place, if there are aliens out there, they've never met them. They've never seen an alien ever. It's all just a bunch of boring humans. It's just so nothing. There's just nothing about this world to captivate me. There's nothing about it that stands out from any other sci-fi. It's paint by numbers sci-fi. And it's also just like unnecessarily bleak. Like, everybody is in horrible poverty, even though there seems to be just like a vast galaxy full of resources just for the taking, but for some reason everyone is miserable and like nobody helps anyone else. If you ever help someone, you give them money, or even if you just help them fight off pirates, they're like, a person helping another person just to do it? That's never happened. That's never happened because we all live in such a miserable world. We're all so horrible to each other that is simply unheard of. It's just bleak. It's not fun. Why? I mean, it's kind of a sore spot for me in general with games, how it's like I'm trying to have a fun game. Do you have to push the whole humanity is bad thing? Is that really where the story always has to go? Is just like, let's explore all the ways that people are bad and people take advantage of each other. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it gets old. And what's so frustrating about this whole issue is that it is not an issue born of any kind of limitation in design or in capabilities of the hardware or anything like that. This is a purely creative issue. When they were planning and writing the game in the early stages, they were building this world. This is simply the world that they decided to build. They decided to build a sci-fi world with nothing really interesting about it and no aliens, nothing weird, nothing like fantastical. The main quest line does get into like a little bit more mystical. Oh, there's a weird artifact and you see in visions and then you get powers or whatever. Like, yeah, there's a little bit of that, but it also kind of just comes off as so generic and so like one and done that it doesn't really have much of an impact. And outside of that, there's just very little in the way of that fun mysticism, that mystery. It's just like, it wouldn't have been harder for them to write something else. They just didn't want to. And like, I can respect their integrity. This was the sci-fi world they wanted to make, and that was their decision. And I'm just disappointed that it does not mesh with me personally. And it's especially unfortunate because I can see the effort they put into this game. I can see the care. There is a wealth of story in this game. We're talking novels upon novels of quests and little stories and just dialogue, so much dialogue. I mean, it's unprecedented. You know, Bethesda, they've always been the best at this, and they have really pushed the boundaries, you know? Like, this is probably 5 times more dialogue and story and stuff than, like, the next game down. It's unprecedented. It's incredibly, incredibly impressive what they have done. And I can see that in there are some interesting stories to be found. I've had a couple little quests that I thought were kind of cool, a couple characters that are kind of fun, and I'm sure if I kept playing, there would be more. I would find more. There's gotta be more good stuff in there, but there's not enough. There's just not enough that feels worth engaging with. There's so much to do and so many NPCs to talk to, and yet this is the first Bethesda game where I have found myself kind of skipping dialogue, you know? Like you have a conversation with an NPC and there's all these different things to ask about, or you could just get to the heart of the matter and ask about the one thing to progress the conversation. I find myself just progressing. I'm just like, yeah, I could. Oh, how long have you been on the station? What's it like around here? I don't care. I don't care. Because this character isn't interesting enough. This space station isn't interesting enough. I don't care what anyone does around here. It's too bland. And because I can't connect with the world and the characters and the story and all that stuff, everything else stops working. The entire formula starts to break down. Now, instead of like fun fluff, quests are just kind of, I'm just following the quest markers, just fast traveling to here, to there, kill the pirates here, kill the pirates there, fast travel from point A to point B to point C. You're just following map markers. I certainly don't feel engaged enough to want to go and explore planets and collect resources and upgrade all my stuff and get a better ship and all that stuff. And that's what's so frustrating, is that whole thing slowly getting stronger, gathering the resources and upgrading. Like, it could be amazing. There's the potential to get so lost in it and to feel so cool after playing for 200 hours and having such a cool ship and being rich and having this empire. I bet that could be amazing. Incremental progress is awesome when you're really locked in because it gives you a lot to play and a lot to work toward. But because I'm not engaging, that incremental progress is just like, ugh, why? Why bother? Why go on this quest to get like 3,000 credits? Why explore this planet and go into that mine just to pick up a couple extra bits of minerals? I just don't care enough. And not engaging with the world also kind of makes like the cracks in the Bethesda formula a lot more obvious. Like, there is something to be said for the Bethesda charm. You know, like the games that I have played, it's fun. The jankiness, it's part of the fun. All the NPCs are so weird and awkward. Like, there's definitely an element of that where, like, I have a fondness for it. And I am happy to a degree that this is a Bethesda game and it plays like a Bethesda game. But it's that charm, it's just a lot less charming now. It's okay to use the same formula, but I kind of wish that they had pushed the formula a little bit more, evolved it. I wish that this felt more like a modern version of the formula. but it really doesn't. It really feels like it's just kind of stuck in the past. It's still janky. You still have NPCs all around you, all like talking awkwardly over each other, and then you just, oh, now I have a quest. I didn't actually hear what that person said because there were 10 people talking, but I guess I have a quest now, and I'll go follow the map marker wherever it leads me. You talk to characters like from behind, and they like take way too long to turn and look at you fast enough, you know? You enter a room, and all the items on all the desks kind of like fall, like they loaded in, and now they're tumbling everywhere. You know what I'm saying? You know, I get in trouble for a really stupid reason, and I can't even talk to the people to like pay a fine. They just open fire on me. Everywhere I go, everyone in the world is just shooting at me, and it's like really hard to fix the problem. Early on in the game, I get stuck in the first city because I don't realize I have to do one specific thing for the main quest, or else I literally can't fast travel, and I'm looking up FAQs everywhere. Why can't I fast travel? Because this is a thing that I had to do that the game wouldn't tell me. Other stuff that just seems completely inexcusable, like item management is terrible. Between like your own inventory and your ship's inventory, and you have to like find a box somewhere in your base that has unlimited storage, and you're always going back and forth between them. It's super tedious. The menus are atrocious. The UI is super sluggish. The maps are almost worthless. They're so annoying to navigate. Even after dozens of hours, it's just awkward. Nothing about the menus and the maps feels right. This is the future. Why do I not have a map of the town that I'm in? In the present, the real life world that we are in, I have a map of the town that I am in. Why don't I in this game? And then of course, straight up glitches. It's not the most glitchy Bethesda game ever at launch, which is like apparently the high praise that everyone's been giving it. But like, it still happens way too much. You know, I've got 2 conversations, both loading at once here, lots of freezes, lots of crashes, quest markers not loading right, things just in general kind of just going wrong and not working. And then, something that feels so much more inexcusable than anything else, the loading times are way too long. This whole entire generation, their whole thing, the only real selling point they had was solid state drives to cut down on loading times. Look at all these games. They don't even have loading screens anymore. Loading screens are like a second long. And yet, leave it to Bethesda to have like the only current gen game that I have played with significant loading screens, and a game with so much fast travel that you see so many of those loading screens. And none of them are terrible. None of them are probably like as bad as, you know, playing Oblivion back in the day or whatever. But it's still so much more than it should be, especially because I know it just feels like I'm nitpicking the heck out of this, but it all makes sense in my head. It doesn't even make sense that the load times are so long, because on a technical level, nothing about this game feels that impressive. They marketed this as like, oh my gosh, it's the biggest game that's ever existed. This is a true next-gen Bethesda RPG, but like, it does not feel like it. Nothing in the game looks that good. At the absolute best, you have fine, you know, pretty good, solid, but then it only goes down from there. There are some elements, especially like on planets, straight up bad. Like, not exaggerating, looks like an Xbox 360 game. And then like, I'm not a frame rate snob at all. I don't actually care that it runs at 30 FPS, but I find it weird that it runs at 30 FPS considering it doesn't really look that good. And it's not even like the whole space thing. Like, nothing about it is so big that I think, wow, yeah, this is only doable this gen. Like, no, there's no one environment that seems so grand and amazing that I couldn't see it running on an Xbox One. It doesn't do any one thing well enough to kind of justify any of its limitations, you know? If it doesn't look that great, why does it not run that great? If it doesn't run or look that great, why doesn't it load faster? I don't know, it doesn't really make sense to me. I have a lot of very critical things to say about Starfield, but I have to say again, it's not a bad game. It's really not. All of this is really just coming more from a place of personal disappointment, because it is a good game. You know, it is very big. There is a lot to do. There is a lot of story, and I could see any number of people being totally into it, falling head over heels in love with it like I did with those other games so long ago. It's got a lot of good elements. It's got good story. You know what? One thing I really want to point out is the voice acting. The voice acting is really good. The Bethesda games I've played, it felt like there were a lot more like repeating voice actors, but here there's a really extremely wide range of actors. The quality is good. They all have a wide range of personalities and voices. This world is very diverse, a lot of different accents and stuff. So I do want to give the game credit there, and I'm sure the game deserves credit in a lot of different areas. There is stuff to enjoy. I just wanted to like it more, and I had fun with it. I did have fun with it. I played it for a few dozen hours. Pretty okay amount of time in my book. It's just that, like, it started really slow, like not even almost as cool as like the beginnings of Fallout or Skyrim or whatever. Very slow. But then it kind of started to pick up. Like the more I played, the more I got into it, I started to enjoy it more, and I was like, okay, now we're rolling. But then I reached a point where the enjoyment level just started to slow. Like, the more I explored, the more I tried to find interesting stuff to do, it all started to feel kind of samey. I was finding it just hard to find quests that sounded actually fun to do. I was scouring every bar in the galaxy for cool companions and finding nothing. I was only finding these, like, boring, kind of grating weirdos. So that was disappointing. I just wanted a fun friend, and I couldn't even find one. And like, I could feel that this was gonna be one of those games where it's like, I'm having fun. I'm like fairly kind of hooked into the formula, but once I put the game down for more than like a day or two, I'm not gonna want to pick it back up again, and that's exactly what happened. I went one too many days without picking it up, and then I found myself with a little free time reaching for the controller and just being like, I don't think I want to. I just don't want to anymore. Starfield is huge. It can be fairly exciting. It's really ambitious. It is something so special and unique in the realm of games when it comes to just story and dialogue and stuff. Really unique and really admirable. But it just doesn't do any other one thing well enough to keep me engaged. Its interesting characters and stories are lost in a sea of paint-by-numbers filler. Its fun gameplay is spread thin across a myriad of tedious systems and activities. Its truly engaging quest lines are few and far apart, and they're diluted by an ocean of bland, repeating content. I know a lot of people hate it when you compare games, but I'm doing it. I love comparing games. To bring up Mass Effect again, I love Mass Effect so much. And you know what? I tried not to, but I thought about it the whole time I was playing Starfield. Because just about everything that you can do in Starfield, you can also do in Mass Effect. In some ways, they're very similar. In Mass Effect, these activities are so much more limited. Way less freedom, less to accomplish overall, less just like systems, less overall content. In terms of scope, it's apples and oranges. Mass Effect, it is a fraction of what you can do in Starfield. And yet, every one of those things that they both do, Mass Effect does better. Way better. The writing is better. The universe is more interesting. It has more to say about the nature of humanity. It's got aliens. It's got cool, fun, weirdo aliens. And even the tedious stuff is a bit more fun because there's a limit to it. You know, it ends. Ever. And because all of that stuff at the very least feeds into your main quests and all that. Honestly, I just think Starfield is too big. I mean, like, obviously there is the creative issue, just the world that they decided to build. I will always have a problem with that. But it could have been so much better if they just hadn't decided to make it a huge million trillion planets. In the end, it just didn't pay off. It was not necessary. It did not do the game any favors. They would have been so much better off giving us 100 planets, or even like a few dozen, 50. That would have still been a lot of planets to explore, a lot of places, and yet they could have made each one so much more interesting. They could have made exploring them all a thing that you actually wanted to do. They probably still could have fit the same amount of NPCs and quests and stories and dialogue and all that stuff, even if they had just shrank down the scope a little bit. As it is though, Starfield is a whole bunch of fine. It is an ocean of fine. A galaxy of fine, as it were. And I was hoping for more. But, oh well. Can't win them all, I guess. Better luck next time. See you in 14 years.